Previously on Ex-Wives Undercover. In the last episode, a young Kari met a man who seemed like the perfect guy. Everybody loved David, but he had some very deep, dark secrets that nobody, not even Kari, knew about. And after getting married and expecting their first child, it was only then that Kari could see that things weren't right. Like finding condoms in his office, becoming more and more possessive, calling her names, and eventually being physically abusive that forced her into preterm labor with their first child. In this episode, we'll hear about the aftermath of that incident and what transpired that left Kari with no choice but to pack a bag and flee to her parents' house with the children in tow.
When I refused to drop the income withholding order that the court had automatically put in place for child support, he lost his mind. I refused to just drop it, and so he kept on, and it got worse and worse to the point where he was finally threatening to kill me.
Welcome to Ex-Wives Undercover.
Liars, cheaters, and love cons.
I'm Amber.
And I'm Athena.
First we told our story, and now we're sharing all of your craziest and most heart-wrenching stories of love gone wrong. Sometimes we laugh.
And sometimes we cry.
But more importantly,
we stand together. All right, girl. You ready to do this?
Let's do it.
The views, information, or opinions expressed on our show by our guests are solely the views of those individuals involved, and by no means represent absolute facts. Opinions expressed by the host and guests may change at any time. Our podcast and YouTube show may at times cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to suicide, abuse, violence. Listener and viewer discretion is advised. Season 5, Episode 2 of Kari's Story.
My son was born about 24 hours after that because once I got to the hospital, they gave him, steroids to help slow that down so that he could get as much medicine as he could get so that his lungs could develop. But he was born about 6 weeks premature. And we spent about a week in the NICU so that he could breathe well enough to go home and so that he could eat well enough to go home. He was too premature to really take a bottle to eat. The sucking reflex just wasn't quite there yet. And so they kept him in an incubator and they would tube feed him. I don't know if I left the hospital while he was there, of course. And luckily enough, they didn't make me. And I was able to sit with him pretty much all of the time. And David was there when he was born, and as well as my friend who was married to Brad. He stayed the first night, but after the baby was born and he was in the NICU, he was going to go home so that he could sleep and get some rest and then bring back whatever I needed the next day. And he didn't show up the next day until late in the night. And when he got there, he was so drunk and smelled so strongly of weed that the nurses in the NICU wouldn't allow him to come in to the hospital to see the baby. And I don't know that they told me that he had come by, but they'd sent him on back home, that it was too late. But they told me later why they had sent him home. And luckily I wasn't allowed to have my phone in the room. And so he couldn't call, and interrupt the babies and the sleeping babies. And so I'm not sure what he was doing or who he was with at the time. And so I was gone for an entire week sitting at the hospital and him partying it up while the baby was, while I was hoping that the baby was going to be okay. And that was really one of the biggest straws that broke the camel's back on that. Even though, I didn't leave him right away. I didn't care if he was there or not, really, after that. Luckily, my son was born, and he was okay. He ended up being okay. He was a little bit small. He weighed 4 pounds and 12 ounces. Not when he was born, but he lost a little bit of weight, of course, in the NICU. So I'm holding a 4-pound baby with a tube in his nose and just trying my best to keep it together. And it's all a result of him throwing me, being physically abusive. I mean, it just, what an impact that one night, that one incident had. So that one still gets to me.
I am sick listening to this. I can't even imagine going through that and having to keep yourself together and being scared for your child and him doing that. Did you have any moment where you could talk to him and be like, what the fuck? Like, you did this? Like, this is all you're doing?
Mm.
Like, what did he say for himself? Or did he just act like no big deal, nothing happened? Like,
He did. He
I
just
don't.
acted like he had no idea. Like, that totally couldn't have happened. But he didn't come in and see him in the hospital either when he was there. His mom sent a gift that he brought up there and left, and that was it. That was all that I saw of him that whole entire week that he was there. I finally convinced the nurses that I would feed him like every 2 hours instead of 3, and I would bring him in daily for weight checks if they would just allow us to go home. I did take him home, and David really improved for several weeks. It was like he was, okay, I've got to get my shit straight so that I've got this baby at home now, and I've got people coming over to see the new baby, and I can't act like these things when other people are around to see it. And so it was like this, well, I'm changing, my ways, I'm going to get it together, whatever. But he never would acknowledge that he had any responsibility in what had happened to the baby at the time. And so,
Was there marks on your neck that anyone would have noticed, or they were just so preoccupied with you're in labor that they didn't notice that there could have been some hand marks or
there
signs of abuse?
there were marks because I had a friend make photos of them. And so I know
So you told somebody.
I did. So his friend
Okay.
Brad, I told his wife, um,
Okay, good girl.
and she knew. And it's almost like I was putting her in a hard situation too, because he was doing a lot for his friend Brad. He helped him. There was some kind of connection with buying him a car, and they were so tightly knit. And it was almost like I was going to put her in a bad position if I asked her to take a side. But she did make those photos for me. But then it just kind of went away. Like, and again, it goes right back to I'm not working, I don't have an education, and I've got a new baby at home, and this is my second child. So what do? He's right back in the driver's seat. He's right back having all the control.
During this time, David's business appeared to be doing well, and in the spring of 2002, the couple moved into a brand new house that he bought directly from the developer. And for a bit, things were better, or so it seemed.
We had several families in the neighborhood that were just really sweet and friendly. We had neighbors next door who would invite us over for dinner and we would hang out with on a regular basis. He had we went on several family vacations. We had several friends that would come over and make dinner. So they would bring their kids to play with ours. He had a very close friend from Italy, and he loved to have him and his wife come over because they would cook and for us. And I would say,
Hey, I wouldn't be opposed to
well,
that.
right, I'll buy the groceries and you can use my kitchen, and then I'll eat whatever you make, right? Because he's a
Yes.
phenomenal cook. And his wife was from a Central American country. And so they would just interact with each other in Italian and in Spanish. And it was just, it was always a big fun experience. And they became close with their neighbors too. And so things were really on track and going well. And it seemed like everybody was happy, and his business seemed to be going well. He had, a lot of money coming in. He got a BMW SUV. He got me a Mercedes wagon to drive around with the kids in. It seemed to all be going pretty positively. So he had a friend of his that wanted to kind of get in on his business too. He'd been involved in a similar business in a local town and had said, that he would like to come and work for him. And they didn't have anywhere to stay close to us. So we finished out our upstairs attic space to have a bedroom, bathroom, living room area for them to come and stay in until they could get started. And they stayed with us for a while. And it was always, it's always interesting to have people that are not related to you living in your home. But they were lots of fun and they seemed like really reasonable people. They had a little girl that was a little bit older than the baby. And so they were, responsible and hardworking. And I think those were the first people to look at me one night when he was not there and say, Kari, something is terribly, terribly wrong here. He had been working with him at his business. And it's almost like he saw the things that were going on and realized that something was not right about the way that he was doing business. I think they were the first ones to just look at me and say, this is not okay. There's something wrong. We're going to get out of this and we're going to move out. And if I question that or question them anymore, he said, I don't know exactly what's happening, but I need to get out of it. I don't need to be involved in this. And so he scared me. And it wasn't very long after that when the Tuscaloosa Police Department detective called me to ask if I would come in and speak with him about his business. And I think that scared me to death because I really, truly had he left in the mornings and he came home in the afternoons. And that's really all I knew.
Kari went voluntarily to the police station to talk with the detectives, and when she arrived, her next-door neighbor was coming out of the office. She hugged her and walked away without saying a word. She had been in there sharing how David had attempted to invest her money in his business.
They had a lot of questions about social security numbers and identity, and they had a lot of questions about how the business was run, and they had a lot of questions that they asked me about if I'd ever seen him doing illegal drugs or selling drugs. And no, I think I've seen him smoke weed twice ever. That's the extent. I've never seen any of this. And I was so totally confused. But it turns out that he would find out a lot of information about someone by running that initial credit check to do their contract for their business. And so when he would go out, he would really target areas that had older homes and older families and older couples, elderly people, to sell them on the fact that they needed a security system. And later, years later, when all of this came out, what he was doing, it's like he was preying on people who were older and didn't have knowledge of how the world was working with con artists and how, back then you didn't hear about Ponzi schemes and you didn't hear about these bad investments and securities frauds and things like that. But he was having people with good credit get a loan and invest that money into his business. And he sold 51% of his business several times to several different folks. And at some point, they all had made a police report because they weren't getting paid back. And, when you go back and read that now, you think, who in their right mind would go to the bank and get a loan for $90,000 and hand it to this man that came to their door to sell them a security system, right?
Yeah.
But he could sell anybody anything. He could talk anyone into anything. After it was all said and done, years later, when I finally saw what was happening and saw the paperwork that the police had finally put together, I think he'd taken off with about $500,000 that he had taken from these older couples that he had investing in that business. So
Oh
I
my
think what
gosh.
had happened
So
with the next door neighbor was that he had tried to get them to invest in his business, and she had seen the writing on the wall. She knew that this was not okay, and when she was questioned about it, she got to tell her story.
did you try to contact him before you went into the police to give him a heads up, like, what is this all about? And when you were in there with the police, were they letting on to what they knew? Or they were just like asking, like, does he do drugs? Does he do this? Like, you were just still completely in the dark.
I had no idea, and they weren't really talkative because when it's a spouse, you don't know if they are aware of what's going on, if they're in on what's going on. You just have no idea. And so I don't think that they were willing to tell me anything because of that, and I understand that. But he was so adamant that I not have anything to do with his business and kept me so busy doing all these other things that I really had no clue what was really going on, and had no reason to question it. And I was 21 years old. So, I mean, how would I know?
David's two friends who had been living with them suddenly moved out of the house, and the last thing they told Kari was, "Be careful. You have no idea what David is capable of."
The night that he walked up to me and said, something is wrong, this is not okay, I feel like he had talked with the police already. And I think that either they had let on to him what was going on, or he had shared what he saw. And he warned me, this is not okay. Like, you need to get out. And I took his advice, and probably within a week, I packed up my things while David was gone, as much as I could get in the back of my vehicle, and drove my kids to my mother's house and stayed.
While he was gone, oh my gosh. Was he just on a holy terror when he realized what you did?
He was, absolutely. But I think he had so many bigger problems at the time. He would call and harass, but you'd hang up and he'd lose interest because he really had so many other things going on with the police and the law, and trying to figure out how he's going to get out of those situations, that he didn't come after me angrily as hard as he probably could have. And I'm thankful for that.
Yeah. So this was a week after the fact. What was it like when you went home? Did you just tell him, like, what the heck was that?
Mm-mm.
Or did you just kind of hold your cards a little close to you and strategize?
Oh, that's absolutely what I did. I didn't mention it to him because I knew that all hell would break loose, and I was afraid of what he would do. I could totally see him being capable of, anything that they had alluded to, and it didn't shock me. And I think that is what scared me the worst, because I acknowledged, yeah, he probably could have done those things. And I just had to take that time to figure out when I could safely go, what I needed to take with me. Did I need to try to get some cash out of the bank before I left? All of those things. And so it took several days to get it together, but the whole time I was just trying to figure out how to get out, and how to get out safely.
What did your parents say when you called and be like, Mama, can I come home? Something bad's happened.
They knew. I mean, they
Yeah.
totally read the situation before I did. They were not
hmm
surprised. And it turns out that they had given him money too. My dad had said later that when he demanded money or needed help with something, that he was afraid to not give him money because he didn't know what would happen to me if he didn't.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
So it's like they were aware, but didn't say anything to me.
But they didn't know about the physical abuse,
No,
right?
no.
So just having that kind of intuition about how he could have been treating you without even really knowing the full scope of of what was really going on.
Although Kari and the children were now safe at her parents' home, she was still very aware that David wasn't out of the picture.
I was really upset, and I really didn't want to talk with him, but you've got to understand, this guy has this magnetic personality, right? He can sell anybody on anything at any time. Like, he had friends that would say, look, he could sell ice to an Eskimo. He's so much fun. He's so much fun to be around. He's such a great personality that he could just about talk anybody into anything. And so he really pushed that on me after I left, and after I think things really got real, that I wasn't just gone for the weekend or gone for a week mad and coming back. And he turned on the charm, and he would want to come and see the kids, and he would bring gifts for me. He would bring a box of Victoria's Secret with, all kinds of lacy things inside. And I'm just like, what is your expectation here? Like, this is not okay. I don't know what's going on with you. I can't get a straight answer. I don't know what the truth is. I don't even know where you're staying right now. And he, would hop around to different friends' homes. I think he was really kind of hiding from being arrested, or thought he might be arrested. And so he just didn't want to be in the same place. And so he wasn't staying in our home anymore. So I went down at some point when I knew he wasn't going to be there, and went to get as much of our stuff, mine and the kids' stuff, as possible, because I had only left with the stuff that I could fit in the car. And I had gone back down, and he had sold furniture. Like, there was huge amounts of furniture that was missing, and that I heard later that he had sold to neighbors and just different friends, trying to get up some cash. And again, I have no idea where that cash went either. So, I still wasn't able to get all of the things. I had childhood items that were in the house that I never saw again. It was really sad. But he did try to, keep that going. And he would always come and want to go out and eat with the kids. And finally he got to the point where he wanted me to bring my kids down to his mother's house so that they could see them. And he didn't have a car at the time because he was borrowing one, whatever the story was. So he had me drive an hour and a half down to his parents' house. And when I got there, his parents weren't even there. That was the time that he took my keys from me and had me stay the weekend with them in the house. He wouldn't let me leave. He told me I was going to play his game. His grandmother, who lived in that house, was there, and it was put on a happy face, and you're going to deal with this weekend. And it was terrifying because he was in one of those modes where, where their eyes just glaze over and you just don't know what to expect is going to happen. And had me stay there the entire weekend without letting me leave the house. I remember just being grateful when it was time to leave. I think he just knew his parents were going to be there, and finally just allowed us to go. But he was just erratic, and he was, oh, I love you so much. I miss you. I need you. I'm bringing you gifts. And then he would do things like that, and you never knew what to expect. And it was at that time I had just said, this is enough. I can't do this anymore. I can't be pulled back and forth. And this went on for months.
Kari did finally pull the plug and file for divorce, and it was finally official in February of 2004. But little did she know that while David was trying his best to woo her back, he had something else brewing in the background that he did not want her to know about.
He had me in his car. I don't remember if we were going to eat or what was going on, but he had me in the front seat of his car. And in the door pocket, there was a lot of envelopes, but there was a piece of ribbon sticking out of the door. And so just instinct, I just picked it up, the little card that had the ribbon on it, and I was looking at it, and it was a wedding invitation. And it was a wedding invitation for him and his bride-to-be. And the wedding was scheduled to be in his mother's home on her porch. And the wedding was scheduled to be 3 weeks prior to that date.
Wait, what? So he was already married?
He was already married. So he would come to my job and sit outside in the car and wait for me. And like before he would go to my parents' house, because I wouldn't stay around when I knew he was coming to visit the children. I would make sure that I was scheduled to work so that I would just not be there because I didn't feel comfortable being there. And then because like it was an hour and a half away, he would come either before or after he'd seen the kids, and sometimes even when he had not seen the kids. And he would wait for me outside the job.
So he was kind of stalking you.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my God. But he had just married someone. Where'd this chick come from? What? Like, what was. I don't even have words. What's happening?
So I feel like I remember that the wedding date was scheduled like 45 days after the divorce was signed, which would mean technically it wasn't valid because in Alabama, you have to be divorced for 60 days. Like it has to be 60 days after the final date of the agreement. So I found out later that he met this woman because she was doing her internship for college at his mother's school. And so they had just met, and it turns out she was several months pregnant.
I feel so many ways. This is crazy.
I know. And the bad part is that, I mean, it's so true. Like, you can't make it up. It's wild. It's wilder than anybody could just imagine, right?
Slowly but surely, Kari discovered what David had been accused of as far as the business went.
He was arrested for 4 counts of theft of property, which was a felony. I think the total number, like the total dollar amount of what he was arrested for was about $500,000. And I didn't find out until later when I actually read the synopsis from the police that I had sent you, where the money had come from, who the people were who were pressing charges. I think it was 4, maybe 5 families that had been affected that he had convinced to either take out a loan or take out money from their savings and invest it into his company. And he would pay them back in increments every month. Then it's like he was robbing Peter to pay Paul. He would borrow from one, and then in order to make the payments for that one, he would have to borrow money from another, and it would just build and build until it just finally blew up, until he wasn't able to pay people anymore.
Did he confess to you at all what he did, or was he still, adamant he did nothing wrong?
No, he didn't do anything wrong. Anything that he had from someone was a gift from them. This sweet little old lady gave me this because she just really loves me and she doesn't have a family and she just wants to take care of me. And that was the majority of the explanation. Like there was no real information there. And then I found out years later when I got the information that he had even included lines in his contracts with some of the folks that they would not speak to me or they would not pursue me for any information or for any money because he just didn't want me to know what was going on.
Of course, there were also trickles of even more information about David's shady dealings as well. When Kari ceased communication with him and requested the state to go after him for child support, his entire demeanor changed.
After he had been arrested, after he had after I had moved out, he did like stupid things. Like he got my engagement ring and it was real. Right. So there's that at least.
Hey, mine wasn't. So you got one on me there.
But he took that and he pawned it for cash, and he had, done all these things, but he wasn't paying bills anymore. So then all the people that he owed money to really turns out that I owed money to, because he had bought furniture with my name on it, and he had bought vehicles in my name, and he had, run up all this debt that I never knew anything about because he was making the payments on it. So I never knew. Like I wasn't working and I wasn't trying to buy anything on credit, so I didn't know. But really nobody knew what was going on because it was just the thoughts of telling somebody all of this shit was like, it was humiliating and it was awful. And you don't want to share it with anybody because you just don't want anybody to know. But that's the worst thing you can do, right? Like when nobody knows, nobody can help.
That's right. That's true. And it is, especially during that time, it sounds like you were kind of like with us, like every other day it felt like something new would be uncovered. And I owe how much? And who do I owe? And who's this lady? And it's just coming at you. So you're kind of in survival mode at this point.
I think when I found all of that out is when he just started just refusing to have any conversations because there was nothing he could say. Right. So that's when he started filing in court and filing, motions to change the child support that had just been ordered. Right. Like that, the divorce had just been signed. And he was already saying, well, I can't afford that. So we're going to have to do something different. And you're just going to have to take this little bit of cash here. And then he had his mom try to reach out to me to get me to agree to lower child support by this private agreement that was not through the court system, just a private agreement signed between me and her and him. And she wanted my dad to sign it too, I guess, as a, what do you do when somebody that's an adult wants you to have your mommy and daddy sign a piece of paper? Like, that was ridiculous. Of course, nobody's going to do that. It was such an overwhelming thing. I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about when you start digging up all this stuff and you just don't know which direction to look, and you don't even know who you can talk to because the people who you thought were your friends, he's staying at their house.
And the worst part too is now that he knows he can't get you back, he's feeling like the tides are shifting and you have more control, which they don't like. Then now you're the devil, and then they start abusing the court system.
Right. Because, automatically all I ever want is money, right? That has nothing to do with anything. It's I want money and I want to withhold his children from him. Well,
of course. Yep.
Right. Well, yeah, I did feel like it was probably best that his children didn't leave with him, considering he was out on bail, waiting for a criminal trial for 4 felonies. But when I was refusing to send the kids to him, I wanted him to be somewhere where somebody else could watch them, right? Like, if you're going to come see them in my family's home, or come take them out to eat and come back. There was no rule for visitation because I had sole custody of the kids, and he agreed to that because he really just wanted to sign the papers. And of course, now that I know he had a pregnant girlfriend, I understand why he was in such a hurry to sign the papers.
Wow. So at this point, he's got the first child who he has nothing to do with and lives with his mom in another state. He potentially could have another one from the girl that called you, but we never really knew if what happened.
Not really sure about that one.
Yeah. And now he's adopted your oldest son and had a son with you. So that's 4 kids. And now he's basically writing off your kids, and like, you can have control, because this is going to play into how later down the story with his current situation. So he's basically letting you be the sole guardian, sole parent, decision making, everything, and he wants to pay little to nothing basically for child support. Interesting.
Right. And then he's got someone else pregnant,
and now so that's baby 5 or child 5, baby 4 biological children, 5 total
that we know of.
Yes.
I mean, he was 30 when I met him, so there's no telling what might have happened
at this point. Right. And we know he had stopped paying child support on the first child, and her husband had legally adopted that child. So there's a pattern of not having children, and it kind of just, here you go, you take care of them, I suppose,
Right. Well, the pattern is, I want this big happy family that I really wanted as a child, but I didn't get because I was raised, in the system. And I'm going to want this big happy family as long as it suits me, but when things go wrong, I want to completely disregard this entire family and start fresh. He knew that he didn't have that control anymore, and he really didn't want to pay that child support money. When I refused to drop the income withholding order that the court had automatically put in place for child support, he lost his mind. And he told me that I was going to drop that income withholding order so that they would stop trying to take money out of his paycheck. And that if I didn't, he was going to plant drugs in my car, that he was going to call the police and have them come and report that I had drugs and have them come and arrest me for having drugs in my car. And of course, you immediately call the police and say, hey, this guy's threatening me with this. I don't know what to do. If he calls, what do I need to do to stop this from happening? I had my dad even was able to, try to call the police and set this, in motion for them to be on the lookout for accusations like that. But I refused to just drop it. And so he kept on, and it got worse and worse to the point where he was finally threatening to kill me. And he said that he would either kill me or he would pick up the boys one day and I would never see them again. Like he would take them somewhere and I would never find them. And I think that was my turning point when he started threatening the children, that I just said, it's not worth it. It's not worth trying to collect anything. He's right now on bail. He's jumping from job to job, because every time he would find a job, they would send an income withholding order. He would quit the job and he would start a new job. And then finally he moved from Alabama to Mississippi, and they were doing the same thing there. And they sent an income withholding order to his last job that I knew about. And the woman from his employer's office called me and said that she had gotten worried about them when he had just stopped showing up for work. And I guess there was some connection with the house that they were living in and her employer. Maybe they were renting it from them. I'm not really sure. But she'd gone over there and it was empty. From there, I had no idea what happened until 16 years later.
Next time on Ex-Wives Undercover.
How long after he went MIA did he show up on the Tuscaloosa Most Wanted? And that had to have been horrifying to be like, there's my ex-husband.
Right, on TV,
yeah,
right?
He's on the nightly news.
Everything was fine and quiet. And, you don't realize how grateful you are for that until you get that ding, right? When my son turned 18, I knew that because of the way that some of the laws work here, you have to make sure that you're registered with the Child Support Collection Agency. And so I had done that, and I had gotten a call from a detective in Tuscaloosa, and he wanted to know if I had heard from David. And I said, no. And he said, oh, are you sure about that? Like almost like that's your story and you're sticking to it. I'm like, well, yeah. What do you know that I don't know? You pushed it down for 16, 18 years. And so it was that feeling of, okay, I don't know what's coming next. And then I got a Facebook message. The first Facebook message that I got was asking me if I had ever been married to David, and did I have any children with him? Did they have the right Kari? And I think the first thing that I said was, do you know where he is?
Can't get enough of Ex-Wives Undercover? If so, make sure to subscribe to our show so that you don't miss any of our exclusive subscriber-only podcast episodes. You can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok, as well as join our true crime community on our private Facebook page. And for those who rather watch the episodes, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. For more information, simply click the link found in each episode's show notes.